Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Conversations on Conversations, where each week we explore a topic to help us have more powerful conversations with ourselves and with others. I'm your host, Sarah Noll Wilson. Now, before we get into part 2 of my conversation with Stephanie Chin, I have a favor. If you haven't, we would love for you to rate, review, and subscribe to the show on your preferred podcast platform. The more reviews we have, the more visibility we can gain, and the more we can bring on amazing guests like Stephanie. So we appreciate you taking the time to do that. Now, let's get into part 2 of our conversation with Stephanie Chin. Now, this week, we're doing something a little bit different because we're actually going to role play a real situation, a real conversation that I'm having to wrestle with. And we're both going to take turns playing the person having to deliver the conversation. And we're doing this for a couple of reasons. One, it gives us a chance to show what it's like to wrestle with these conversations. And two, it helps you see how different people approach it so you can hear different language. So I'm so excited for you to hear part 2 of my conversation with Stephanie Chin. So for those of you who are listening right now, we're recording this just after us in the U.S. celebrating Thanksgiving. So what I want to explore with Steph is to talk about knowing that there's going to be interactions coming up, not just with holidays, but just, social gatherings, right? Whether it's with family, whether it's with friends, of just, how do we talk about when we have a need? And so my need is I want to have some expectations of how we're showing up, especially because COVID is still very much a thing. And so let's see, where do I want to start with this? Do you want me to start with telling the experience, or do we want to talk about scenarios that I'm anticipating that I struggle with?
Let's start with the activity.
Okay.
And for folks who are listening, I really asked Sarah to struggle with me on this podcast so that we can demonstrate the work that it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And also the thoughtfulness behind consent. And so this is something we'll go into, but I love food analogies. So let me say, Sarah wants to agree what's on the menu when she meets up with folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do we agree to? What are the things that we can expect? How do we get to shared expectations? Because so often we get into a place where we're already there, somebody's already ordered for us, and we found out we didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to try to figure out what's a good way that will help us in any conversation, but we often start with things like family and Thanksgiving and holidays and things like that, because a lot of the things that show up at work started at home.
Yeah.
And every holiday movie is about how your family is loving and drives you crazy. And so it's a great context to talk about how do you set boundaries with the people who are honestly the most important people in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the least likely to let them go and the most likely to keep them if they don't operate like you do, because we choose our friends, we choose our workplaces, we choose where we live now. We don't choose who our family is. And so this is a great conversation to have. So Sarah, if you want to set us up with the scenario, and then you can pretend like I'm a someone and start going.
So the first would be in preparation for coming together, particularly if it's we're all going to be staying at the same house for 5 days. So, this is just to level set some context, that it isn't we're going to get together for dinner and see each other for 2 to 3 hours. This is, we're going to be existing in each other's space for 4 to 5 days. And you just want me to see, I feel like I've thought about this so much now. I have better strategies. I feel like I need to be here's how I messed it up the first time.
Well, because you've thought about it, this will give folks language.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I also don't have to respond nicely.
Truth.
Yeah.
And then I'll just shut down and be okay.
But that's what you have to work through, right? So the practice should always be harder. And this is me prepping you, right? The practice should always be harder than the actual. And that's what makes practice helpful, because then once you go through it, you're like, oh, the real stuff is going to be easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, hey, Steph, I know we're going to be, staying at mom and dad's for, 4 to 5 days. And I, was hoping that we could talk about what kind of precautions we want to take to make sure that we're both coming into that space as safe as possible related to COVID. Would you be open to having that conversation?
Where is this coming from?
I mean, I don't want to get COVID again. Like that's, it's, I don't want to get it again, and mom and dad have largely avoided it. So I would like to do whatever we can to keep them safe.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what I would like is that if we would be willing to test ahead of time. I know that that's not 100% guarantee that means that we're negative, right? Things can always come up, but for me, it feels like if we can at least do everything we can, and then if we still get it, at least we did our best. Like, would that be okay with you all to test ahead of time?
So, what you're saying is if I test positive, you don't want to see me?
I mean, if you test positive, I don't want to spend time with you in person. We can spend time virtually. But it's not about not wanting to see you. It's just about not wanting to. I mean, honestly, I don't want to deal with losing 3 months of my life again, like I did this summer.
Oh, so are you like blaming me for that?
No, I'm not. I'm just, I went through a really stressful situation, and I don't want that to happen with us because you are really important to me. And I want to avoid any kind of issues that could happen if we're not on the same page.
Oh, okay. How do you want to do this?
I mean, and I'm happy to send tests, buy tests, because I know they're not cheap because we, live in America where nothing's covered medically. But if we just test ahead of time and just let each other know what the results are. And then obviously if somebody comes down with something, we wear a mask,
So I just want to say, I just really like to see you. Like, I love to see your face. I love to give you a hug. So even if you get COVID, I still want to see you. Like, if I get it, that's fine to me. So I understand you want me to test, but like, come anyway. I just don't want to miss you.
Mm. And I appreciate that. I wouldn't be able to live with myself.
Mm-hmm.
It would be too heavy of a ethical thing. I would never want to expose somebody, and I would never want them to go through what I've either gone through or what I've seen other people go through. So while I appreciate that, it's like my act of love to keep those around me safe. And so I'm not, if I was positive, I would stay home because I wouldn't be able to enjoy myself anyway. And the risks that can come from long COVID, from personal experience, are too great. And I care about you too much to take that risk with you.
How do mom and dad feel about it?
Well, they want to stay safe, but mom and dad aren't going to be the ones to enforce anything. So, I think where they're at now is like, well, we're getting together. These are just the risks we take. And that's fine. But this is just where I'm at.
Okay.
So will you do it?
Sure. Send them to me.
It's interesting. So there's people in my life. There's, family, friends who I know I could have that conversation and it'd be super easy. Then, yeah. Right? And then there's people with whom I don't know.
So for the listeners, it sounds like we're outside of the scenario.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Now I'm outside of the scenario. Thank you. No, wait. Let's finish it. Let's wrap it up completely. I really appreciate you doing this. It means a lot to me that you're willing to do this. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate that you're willing to meet me where I'm at so that we can do this.
I'd love you. I'd do anything for you.
No, I love you too. And this is where the theater person in me is like, and scene.
Well, and like, let's unpack some of
Yeah.
this, right?
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, I mean, obviously, like, role playing, even as somebody who does theater and improvisation, it's super uncomfortable, but it is so valuable. But what I was reflecting is there are people who it's like, hey, we're going to test, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've already got my
Yeah.
bot, you know, or they're sending me the picture before I do.
Mhm.
And then there are people with whom you're like, I don't, you know, like,
Yeah.
especially when we were taking a lot more precautions, it was like, and you know, and then there are people with whom you're like, is this gonna be a thing, because it's been a thing in the
Mhm.
past, and how do we navigate that?
Well, and I'm going to inject some regionality in this, although this is
Yeah.
broad
Right.
strokes. I was living in San Francisco during the pandemic, which is very shut down, right? And very like we're not meeting up with each other. We're only meeting up like very cautious and very judgy of people who didn't get a vaccine. And then I have family in Ohio where there were some precautions, and my family certainly were all on the same page, which is very lucky. But like Ohio's generally no masks,
Yeah.
walk around, no issues. And different people's comfort levels really have to be negotiated much more in spaces where there's a variety of responses.
Yeah.
And I think, especially during the pandemic, it has been very easy to take things personally. Like, oh, so you don't want to see me then?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But I want to see you, and I'm willing to risk it, right? And that's why I injected that, because it can feel like a rejection of the time spent. And a part of me wonders if you want to emphasize in this conversation, like, I really want to spend quality time with you where I'm not worried about getting sick. And I just don't feel like I can do that if we don't do some of these things, because I'm worried now, right? Like, I'm literally worried about getting COVID, but it's also not just COVID.
Right.
Right. And you didn't raise that in the conversation of like, hey, one of the things I've just realized is there's so many other times we can see each other. Right. If someone's sick, there's let's avoid the public health hazard of someone else getting it. Right.
Yeah.
We see it with all the preschoolers. They send it to everyone.
Sure. Yeah.
Everyone gets it. Right. And I like to inject some humor in that too, right? Like, my nephew's in kindergarten, so he's getting everyone sick all over the place. Well, let's not spread that around, right?
It's it's interesting because, like, when it comes to, you know, like, asking people to put on masks, like, that's something, you know, that, and I'll just say this, and I appreciate that you spoke to the regionality. So for people who are listening from other countries, so I'm based in Iowa. Iowa was very much you're on your own. And for the vast majority, the majority of people, even during the heat of the pandemic, like in the worst of it, were not wearing masks. And so then you feel isolated, and you feel like I felt excluded, isolated, and not knowing. Whereas when I got together with friends from other cities, it was like, you don't even need to ask me this. Of course, this is what we're going to do. So I think I appreciate you bringing in that context so people understand my scenario. And yeah, I mean, I feel like every time I go home, there's this like, and I can exist with you wearing a mask, and we can sit and chat, and I can still coexist with you, and we can do a lot of similar things. Like, if we know that it's not positive, like, there's a lot we can do. And, you know, and something that I do share with like folks is I used to be sick all the time. And when I say that, I mean, I would probably spend 4 to 6 months out of the year dealing with some kind of sinus infection, some kind of cold, some kind of whatever, right? Because I traveled a lot. I'm with folks when, you know, you talk about kids, and I know you have right nibblings too. Anytime you go home for the holidays, Nick and I are just like, we know we're leaving sick. Like, this is just like, we don't hang out with a 3-year-old, and we don't pick something up. But just this, like, a new rule. I mean, like, that's part of it too. And one of the things I want to share with folks that I think is such an important concept that you're bringing to this work, that is that idea of consent, right? Consent in having the conversation, consent in how we move forward. And like, because it's so often we think about consent only in terms of sexual intimacy. And while it's really critical there, I've been really pondering that since you first brought that up in a previous conversation of, realizing that the situation in which I caught COVID, I assumed agreement and consent of how we are going to exist. And that was an assumption I made that was inaccurate. And so I'd love to I would love to hear more from you about that idea. Cause I as somebody who studies relationships and conversations and how do we have difficult conversations, it was the first time I've come across somebody talking about the idea of consent in non-sexual situations. And I think it's such an important perspective.
Yeah. Well, and consent ends up being very tricky because you want two consenting partners, right?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? And who wants to have what conversation? And I was just a presenter on ERG meeting for a company, and the way I spoke of it was if you're sharing a bowl of food, you're sharing a conversation, if I spice it up to my level and you don't like spicy, that's not fair to you if you have to eat something that's too spicy for you, right? Also, if I just leave it bland and I don't get to enjoy it because we don't have the same spice level, how do we figure out how to get two side bowls and I can add the spice or whatever that looks like? Or, how do we make it in a way that we both agree on what's going to happen? And consent is really important to just be clear, right? So I'm going to go back to clear and caring. What are we trying to do? What are we trying to say? What's important? We all have assumptions. I always go back to the game of telephone from childhood, which I don't know if kids play now. I doubt it. But telestration.
I was going to say, we just had a healthy game of telestration.
Right? It's a game. But
which is also dating us.
Never does someone get exactly the same message that you sent. And so the check back is really important. And so the importance of consent is, I want to have this conversation. Do you? Are you in a place to? But I've also brought up to some folks, who usually gets to control when they have the conversations, right? Those with more power. And so, yes, consent. And if you tend to be someone who gets to have the conversations you want to have when you want to have them, try having some more conversations where you don't, right? And you let the other person lead, especially a person who you have noticed in other interactions other people don't consent to hearing, because we're missing a lot in those conversations. But I think the importance of it is, you're not going to have the conversation you want to have if I don't want to have it with you. So there is no conversation without my willing participation. It's just you talking at me or doing something to me, and vice versa. Right. And so the importance of consent is, it's not a productive conversation if one of us is unwilling in it.
And that's, right. The, would you be open to, it's, and so I'll give a little bit of just very high level, background on the scenario that happened with us. Was going on vacation with family, right? We're all staying in a cabin together, thinking that we're in agreement with what precautions we are going to take, or what precautions we are going to take when somebody gets sick. And, and I'll own that I wasn't as clear in my concern, for a number of reasons, both internal and managing external relationships. Right. And this is part of when you have a culture of avoidance, and avoidance. And when I say avoidance isn't just difficult conversations. It can also be avoidance of any kind of intimate conversation, even just as simple as saying, I love you and I care about you. Right. And there, in our situation, it wasn't just that we got COVID. It was how it was treated. It was how, we felt like we were treated, and the precautions that wasn't taken. And there needed to be a conversation afterwards, because there was some pretty significant damage done to the relationship. And that was something that we were very thoughtful about. how can we have this conversation in a way that we'll both feel good about it? You know, it could have been really easy to lash out and be like, well, you did this and you did this and you did this. And it was like, no, we do value you. Like, you know, you talked about the email. Like that was a
Yeah.
circumstance where it was like,
Yeah.
I can't have that conversation right now. I'm too angry still.
Yeah.
And I'm weak. Like I'm weak from having
Mhm.
really pretty serious COVID. And I'm too angry. And finding a place. And, you know, and so with this particular family member, it was like, I just want it to be right. This person and this person. It's like, okay, then
Mhm.
like, let's meet in the middle. And I think that that is something that I've learned on my journey. And why I really resonate and appreciate that language of consent is so often, I mean, like you said, it's like you either are talking at someone's unwilling, they're not ready, or we're avoiding it. Right. And, you know, and then we're leaving and damage is done. But that also just goes back to that first point you made of like when we can come from a place of care. And again, like reminding ourselves, I care about this person. I care about you. I care about our relationship. I care about your ability to grow. Is so important. And I want to make sure that we don't roll over. I mean, there's, you know, that I think that's a really provocative and important challenge you put out. So I don't want to miss it. Of if you're somebody who often gets to drive the conversation, if you're somebody who, right, like if you're a manager, like look at your world. There's places in my life where I know I can drive the conversations, and there's places where I don't feel like I can. And I love that challenge that you put out of like, don't like, and really seek out who are the people that people aren't listening to. Which goes back to your point that you made earlier, which is relationships are a privilege that can get us access to things that can impact how we feel about ourselves, that can impact our access to opportunities and all of that. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose that really important challenge of how do we step into different roles than we're used to stepping into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can I try the exercise?
Yeah.
And then let's recap on what we like about what each one did. So Sarah, I'm so excited. So scene starting.
So, yeah.
Right? Sarah, I'm so excited to see you for the holidays. I'm excited we're going to get to spend a bunch of days together.
It's been too long.
How are you feeling?
Good. It's been too long. I can't wait. I got the dips made.
Good.
You know?
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
I'll eat them. I've got the mouth. So there are a couple things that I was thinking about just to like, you know me, I'm a worrier. So do you mind if we talk about some things so that I can like come in feeling just as excited as I'm feeling right now?
Yeah, sure. What's on your mind?
Yeah.
Cue my inner like, oh shit, what's coming? Like
right. And I say that because I want you to be prepared for this conversation, but it's not a big deal. It's really just, you know, last time I got really sick and I really don't want to be sick or get anyone else sick. And I also want to check with other folks about how they feel if someone gets sick. How do you feel about what that process looks like given last time and how things turned out?
I mean, you know, that's kind of the risk we take when we get together, Steph. I mean, we're all agreeing to be together. And so part of that is accepting that we might get sick as a result.
Well, I so appreciate the time that we have together. And I don't think that we have to see each other only because it's the holidays, but we can see each other when we're well. And I don't want to be someone who gets someone sick. I have this really big fear of being patient zero. I actually know someone who is patient zero do you remember the swine flu?
Yeah.
When I was in grad school.
I
knew the student who brought it to the school. And so I just have this fear of like spreading it around, and like I worry about mom and dad, and I don't want to be the person who brings it to them. Or other people that I interact with. And like, I also don't want to get it if I can see you another time when everyone's feeling healthy. And so I was really hoping that we could all test just to like give ourselves some peace of mind and give me some peace of mind. If we could test the day before we arrive and send everyone funny pictures like next to our silly faces of our test results so that if someone's sick, I might just decide to come meet up with y'all another time.
I mean, I know I've got the
And
sniffles right now, but I'm sure it's just
yeah,
allergies. I mean, it's just
what,
allergies.
and there's no harm in checking, right? Like, because we never know. And I have a bunch of work trips coming up and I don't want to give it to someone else. I just am just very aware of that. And I think I'm a little bit nervous for our parents as well. So do you feel like it's a big deal to check and to just take a test the day before so that we have a little bit more information going in? And but what I'm thinking right now is if someone happens to be sick, I will probably opt out. I'll still send whatever I was supposed to send in, but in order to keep everyone safe, and then let's like reschedule to another time when folks are feeling better. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, if that's what you need to feel better, that's fine.
Yeah. Do you want me to send you some tests? Because I'm running out anyway, so I can drop some at your door, and I have a couple treats for you as well.
I mean, I love chocolate, so I'll take bribe. No, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Well, I will see you soon.
I look forward to it.
I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Scene.
And scene. You know, I was like really quickly, I was in my head, I was just like, one, those are real things that have been responses.
Yeah.
And then it's the like, you're just overreacting.
Yeah.
Like, how would you, okay, let's take it back a second.
Oh, I'm totally the overreactor in my family.
Oh yeah,
like,
no, I am
we
too.
We all know it.
Right? It's
right?
like, you're just like, overreacting. And it's like, maybe. And
well, this is who I am.
Yeah.
Right? This is what's important to me.
Yeah.
And like, I really love you and I'm really excited to see you. And like, we all have different tolerances. And that's one of the things my family's been on a journey on too, is like, I think when I was younger, there was kind of this like, why are you responding so big? Right? Like there was not an understanding, not a context for understanding. We didn't have social emotional learning when I was growing up. And I have big emotions and big feelings in positive, like I shouldn't say positive, but like in happy ways. Like I have the roller coaster of feelings and more of my siblings are more steady. And so just being like, this is who I am. And like, I appreciate that you'll do this thing for me because I love you and this is important to me.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you're not going to get the response you want. Like it would have been totally okay if the other person said, you know, I'm not comfortable with that. And I were to say, okay, I'm not going to come this time, but I'd love to see you outdoors when the weather's nicer because Iowa and Cleveland are both cold in the winter.
It's
right.
Yeah. No, it's interesting too, like in those moments from the standpoint of one of the things I have to work through or have had to work through for sure is really just owning these are my needs and being okay that your comfort, your needs, or even your values are different because there are times when it felt personal of like, you don't care enough about me or the family to take even the basic precautions and like staying anchored in like, this is just what I need. And setting that boundary and being okay with that boundary. And, you know, and it's, and boundaries, depending on your family, your history can be really scary, you know, but I think that, you know, I mean, there's a couple of things that you said that I think were really lovely of, you know me, I'm a worrier. Cause sometimes there can be value of like, I don't want to say playing lower status. That's not what it is, but it's like, I don't know what the right language is.
It's owning that I am not like everyone else. Right. Like it's identifying who you are and you can call it whatever you want. But one of the reasons why I love like personality assessments, which, I can quibble about any of them. But what I like is it creates the shared expectation of, I know I have concerns you don't have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's okay. And like, I'm not saying you have to have those concerns or that you have to agree with my concerns. I just have them.
Yeah.
and you know that I have them. You know that it will be hard for me to participate if they are not honored. And we can all love each other in our own ways and have different needs. But I don't like pepper soup that's super spicy, right? Like that is not, it's not a value judgment. And I think very often we do take it as a value judgment of the people that we love.
Totally.
Right? That's what all the holiday movies are about, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're not like me. And so there, you either judge who I am, right? You don't like it. So because you've chosen to be something else, you don't think it's a good thing for me to be. But instead, it's good for you, not for me, right? Don't yuck someone else's yum, right? And like, I know that this is something that's important to me. I worry about this stuff. And I did. So I opted out of family holidays for the first time in my entire life. I didn't go home for some family holidays. And the whole family was like, come anyway.
Yeah.
Like, right? And like in a loving way. And I was like, you know what? If I fly there and I get, especially one of our older family members or one of our young, one of the kids, one of the babies sick, I will feel bad.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be put in that position. Not to mention all the experiences that I've seen you go through with the COVID response and like how it has continues to make you feel tired. So all of those things together, these are the things I own as a part of myself. And I appreciate that you're there for me and with me. Versus we should all believe this thing, which I think I love San Francisco. I've lived there many, many years. San Francisco's are kind of like, how could you not have our value system? There must be something wrong with you.
I think as humans we get into that. I mean, right? Like, I mean, I hear that. It's just like, right? It's the whole my island versus your, like, duh, my preferences are great for me.
Yeah.
And so they must be great for other people. And I think that that's a really good check and a good practice of how do we own our needs and our values without making like judgments or expectations. And that, I mean, that was hard. That was real hard, like in the heat of it for both Nick and I to be like, are we the crazy? Like, are we in a, like, you know,
feeling a little bit gaslit? Like, is there something wrong with my value system?
Yeah. You know, and also being frustrated of just like, you know, not necessarily to relive that, but then you can insert that into whatever scenario, right? Like that happens. The other thing that you brought up, and you brought it up in mine too, and I want to like, I think it's a really great perspective and practice to think about, is examining the language I would use is it a rule or a possibility? And, you know, when you brought up like, hey, and if we don't get together for Christmas or whatever holiday, like if we don't get together, we can still see each other in other ways, or we can still, and I think that sometimes that becomes a trap too, of we, especially again, when we think about traditions and rituals, whether they're at work, whether they're in our family, whether they're with friends, they can feel so permanent when they're not necessarily, you know, and I mean, that's definitely something we're navigating is like my immediate family has been able to have a very like consistent tradition around Christmas. And now it's changing because the family's changing, and that has caused, right, some tensions around it. But so I wanted to name that like almost speaking to and challenging. This isn't a rule that this is the only way we get to spend time together, even around, right? Like if it's a holiday or, you know.
Well, I just want to say that practicing with someone, no matter who else, helps you be ready.
Yeah.
And too many times we're nervous about a conversation and we just talk about it in a way that is helpful, but is not as helpful as starting to use words, because that's where people who want a script will start to come around. Here's the types of things I want to say. Or, ooh, I really liked it when you said that.
Yeah.
And so I wanted like bring some of that into whatever conversation. You get new ideas when you do it with new people. That's one of the particular values of role play, is you hear the way someone else says something. You're like, I want to say something like that.
Yeah.
That's great. And I never would have thought of it without doing it as an interaction with someone else. That is different from, oh, have you thought about blah, 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 blah. All right.
That's a really great point. And it allows you to be messy, you know, and especially if you can be with somebody who's like, hey, give me some rough like
Yeah.
reactions and like let me, because that's part of it too is, we use the term like holding steady, right?
Mhm.
Meaning, how do I sit in my discomfort right now? How do I sit in
Mhm.
my whatever it is, like I want to just flight out of here. I just want to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
freeze, or I want to, but like how do
Yeah.
I stay anchored in this
Mhm.
moment? And that is one thing that practicing with someone can also give you, is not only helping you the words, but like how do I work through, right, the
Yeah.
emotions of even what it's like to talk about this. um
And I'm a big name it, like from coactive
yeah.
coaching, right? Their ideas. So like, I'm gonna show up a little messy. Is that okay with you?
Hmm.
Right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know exactly what I want to say, but I know this is important, but I know you're more important than this. And I'll say that like my family loves being right. Right? Like the hey, I think it's this or I think it's that. This is the memory. Let's Google it to find out who's right. Like
Sure.
love the triumph of being like, yeah, my memory was the best. But relationships aren't about that.
Yeah.
It's about like how we're probably both right,
Yeah.
but we're looking at it from different angles. And um how you honor that space is really hard when you're also challenging something that is very different
Hmm.
within it. But often I find that like what's based within the tradition or the action is different from what the surface action is,
Mm.
right? So it's a tradition that we all come together on Christmas.
Hmm.
Could be it's a tradition that we all find time for each other.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be Christmas,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or we do a Zoom call, which a lot of families did. And you can still have time with each other. Actually, like my family has this massive group chain text that has the highest level of engagement
Yeah.
we ever have had, right? Because after we all moved away from each other, we were never part of each other's dailies. And so we
Yeah.
only saw each other at the holidays. But now that we have this group text, I get 50 texts a day. Like it's 10 people or more on the text. If a couple people send something, it ends up being this whole
Sure.
conversation. It can sound like it's ringing, right? But the connection is the tradition.
Yeah.
The how can change.
Yeah.
So like I try to think of it that way of
Mhm.
like there's the activities of the tradition, but what is the core of the tradition is how you find space and time for each other.
It's no, that resonates real deeply with me right now, because like as we're examining basically moving from an entire lifetime of being able to be together on Christmas Day. I mean, it's very fortunate. As
Mhm.
big as my family is, we've been able to navigate that. Well, now we have family who lives away, who has littles,
Yeah.
who, right, will be traveling to the other side, right, across country.
Mhm.
And I just had that aha this weekend of like, what is it that we love to do? Because we can do
Mhm.
that whenever. Let's just
Yeah.
like what do we love? Like, what do we really want to do together? Like ultimately it's that we want to spend time together, have time to play games, and right, like
Mhm.
enjoy a meal together, but
Yeah.
mainly it's time. So then it's just like, well, okay, great, so let's find another date
Mhm.
that we can do that and navigate that. And
Yeah.
I think that again, that is a practice that, I mean, we're applying it to something that's very clear, right? Like holidays and how do we spend time
Mhm.
together, but you can apply that to lots of situations of, again,
Yeah.
like, what is it that we're really wanting? What is it that we really need in this moment? What are limitations we're putting on that, so we can meet each other in the moment? I love your analogy of like we're sharing soup, right? And if it's
Mhm.
too if
Yeah.
it's too spicy um or not
Someone
enough,
doesn't like okra
right?
or right?
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
it's I had a quick side note, but you were
Yeah.
talking about like the example of, I want to be able to like order with you. I don't want to show up and have it
Mhm.
ordered. I mean, like I
Yeah.
had a situation where culturally where we were in the country where we were, that was
Mhm.
very, the problem is everything that got ordered could kill me with my shellfish allergy. And so then it was like,
Yeah.
shit, like I don't want to be the
Yeah.
like picky. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to be picky, but I can't, I will
Yeah.
literally die if
Yeah.
I eat any
Yeah.
of this. Like, can
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I need
Well,
something
and
else.
I was recently asked a question. I get asked this question a lot. Like, how do you help people who aren't ready for the spicy conversations?
Mm.
And what I often say is one-on-one, almost everyone I talk to is ready for spicy conversations. They just don't want me to spice their meal,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
They want to choose, right? So when we
Yeah.
talk about the menu and consent,
Mm.
choice is an important element. If it feels like something is being forced upon us, which is, I think, part of the elements
Mm.
of what was hard for you when you got sick.
Mm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
there was no choice of yours
Yeah.
involved to opt in or opt out,
Yeah.
right? And that is tough for folks, but most people aren't thinking about the world that way when they're interacting with folks. So they're just not slowing down to be like, oh, is this an opt-in, opt-out position?
Yeah.
There is this assumption that's built in.
Yeah.
And so it really is slowing down and being more cautious and conscientious about how other folks are going to respond. And like the fact that your worldview is not the only one out there.
Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
and I think the other thing I just want to name that I think you do really well is like you also create an invitation, right? Like
Yeah.
that there are times when, and that's something that I've learned from you that I, do with my clients, or right, like it reinforces things that I've known, and it's just this like, hey, I want to explore this with you. Can we talk about this? And then, and again, that goes back to that opting in and opting out, so people aren't caught by surprise. They aren't. And again, this can be something that's difficult and a conflict or a disagreement or a hurt between two people. But this can also just go to, I mean, this is something that we're continuing to try to, when I say we, like Nick and I, we're like talking a lot about gender roles, and we're talking about intimacy and like, and how to have more conversations, like, men to men, man to man, from the standpoint of like, how do we talk about our emotions? Like, I mean, it can be conversations that, so I think like, I want to just like broaden it for folks, because those, it doesn't always mean a disagreement. It often can mean but it doesn't have to. Yeah. And so like that idea of an invitation, one, like readies yourself to be. What I love about it as a practice is it reminds you that they have a different perspective than you. It reminds you to be open to their perspective, right? It puts you into more of that curiosity place, because it isn't just you coming and telling. And I think that like these little, they may seem really simple, but they're so powerful, because so many of us, that's not how we interact. And it's like,
well, if you ever want to know what's on someone's mind, you can just be like, hey, how you doing? Right? And one of the things I talk about in leadership is, so many leaders were raised on the like, I have an open door policy, anyone can come in. And I go, who comes in?
Yeah.
Does anyone? No one comes in. So when people do approach you, when do they do it? Oh, it's when you're out somewhere outside of your office?
Yeah.
Have you thought about spending more time there?
Yeah.
And they're like, no. And I spend a lot of my time knocking on doors with invitations to join.
Yeah.
Right. And it is amazing how many people jump on board when they're invited to join.
Yeah. And when they know they'll be heard, right? Like, and just like, I really want to hear your perspective, and listening to it and all of that. Yeah.
Oh, wait, you're going to listen and do something about it and say that I matter and say that I'm valuable when I haven't felt very valued. Yeah. And like, there's a lot of things to learn in the workspace around, people. I have had this tremendous career of long relationships with different people throughout my career that I can go back to. And I maintain those relationships because people always knew I cared. I care about the work and about them as individuals. And I want them to do better work, not because they're coming from a place of deficit, but I'm like, what is your level up program? Like, everybody wants to go up to the next Super Mario level. They don't want to just stay in the same one, whatever that means to them. And so it's the listening, right? And so if you notice, a lot of the things that I wanted to say when I practiced with you was, how do you think? What do you feel? What are the, it's more listening than telling or saying, but creating that space to be like, this is important to me. Is it important to you?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I do have a little card that I'm happy to share with you and your listeners that people can even print out, put it. It's the size of a credit card so that you can put it in your credit card holders behind your phones if you like. This is my niece's artwork. Um, and it really is just about like making things easier and making people, what I find is very often what it is pent up demand for a conversation that um, people are just waiting for someone to invite
Yeah.
them to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's we will definitely post that resource that you're talking about because
Yeah.
it lists a couple of really, really great like statements and questions and things you can be thinking about in the show notes. And then I mean we're coming up on our time stuff and this has been an
Yeah.
absolute treat. It's been a long time coming. I mean we have
Mm-hmm.
lots of episodes in us, so this isn't the last you're going to be hearing
Yep.
from Stephanie for sure. But as we wind down our time, I want to ask
Yeah.
you to share with us the question that we ask everyone. What's a conversation you've had with yourself or with someone else that was transformative?
Well, I already spoke to one, which is really the like how you say things
Mm,
can
mm,
invite someone into a
mm.
conversation or not. And I make the reference point of I knew a guy who just said things poorly but had really good intentions. But he'd be like, Stephanie, you don't look good in a dress. You look good in pants. Wear more pants. And like he should have just said like I love you in pants, right? Like
Yeah.
that could have been it. And then so like um that has been a really big point for me, as well as, you know, if we use Myers-Briggs, I'm natural and ISTJ, but really the value of people's feelings and how we should think about those has been another really transformative thing. Like
Mm,
how people feel about something really predicts more
mm,
about how they're going to respond than how they think about
mm,
something.
mm. Love that. For
Yeah.
people who are listening and who are like, I want to have more spice in my conversations, what's the best way to
Yeah.
connect with you?
So on my LinkedIn profile, which is Stephanie Chin, Chief of Spice at Spicy Conversations, people can schedule time with me on my Calendly for free, for ease. I love talking with folks, and really everything's about listening as a leader. And you can follow my content along that way or on Facebook. I'm actually in the process. Previously, all of my work has been with people I already knew, and I'm starting to build a brand around it. And so I'll be building more things, but that's great. My Twitter is Chin Thoughts, and I'm building out the Spicy Conversations one. And there's a Facebook page as well. So there's going to be multiple places in social media that folks can connect with me. And the easiest thing is if you want to talk and we've never talked before, schedule a time using my calendar, which is directly linked on my LinkedIn profile.
Beautiful. We'll post all of those.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate, when she says, yeah, no, just do it, she means it.
Yeah. Particularly young professionals who don't do it because you're afraid.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's a good call out. Stephanie, you have been a treat today and a gift in my life. And I'm so excited that we got to be in conversation today and to introduce our listeners to you. And I look forward to future conversations. And thank you so deeply for the impact that you continue to have on me and engaging in these conversations together.
But thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to more spicy conversations with you.
Our guest this week has been Stephanie Chin as we complete our two-part series on having spicy conversations. There's so many notes that I took, and a couple that are standing out for me is one, just reminding ourselves that we may never know the whole story of what someone's bringing to the table. And the other is just that how do I continue to invite people into conversations? And we'd love to hear what resonated for you. What are you thinking or doing differently as a result of our time together? So you can reach out to us at podcast@sarahnollwilson.com, or you can find me on social media where my DMs are always open. And if you'd like to find out more about our work, and how we can help your team have the conversations that matter, check us out at sarahnollwilson.com. Also, if you haven't, pick up a copy of my latest book, Don't Feed the Elephants, wherever books are sold. And if you'd like to support the show, there's two ways you can do it. First, rate and review and subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice. This can be Apple's Podcasts, this could be Spotify, this could be Google. But the more reviews we get, the more we show up and the more we can invite amazing guests like Stephanie. So please make sure to rate and review the show if you haven't already. Also, you can become a patron. You can go to patreon.com/conversations on conversations, where your financial support will support the team that makes this podcast possible. Speaking of the team, I want to give a big shout out to our incredible group that makes this podcast possible, to our producer, Nick Wilson, sound editor, Drew Noll, transcriptionist, Becky Reinert, marketing consultant, Caitlin Summit Nelson, and the rest of the Snowco crew. And just a big final thank you to Stephanie Chin for joining us and suggesting that we did a real-time role play so that we could show people what it looks like to struggle through it and the value of being able to talk out a conversation before you have it. This has been Conversations on Conversations. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, when we can change the conversations we have with ourselves and others, we can change the world. So with that, please be well, rest, rehydrate, and we'll see you again next week.